This module is all about the questions that project managers should be asking. And it begins with how to get to the point where you understand what the client is actually looking for. So in this pre-kickoff stage, you need to think about who actually needs the information. Which team might the information ultimately be going to, brand or clinical? And this is your first question. Why do they need it? Are they looking to just get a snapshot of the market? Or are they beginning to look a bit deeper and thinking about possible threats or possible opportunities? Now, at this point, when you're interacting with the client, the easiest way of doing this, of course, is email. But if there is a way of actually talking directly with the client, it's much better for creating the relationship that will give you so much more. But this in itself brings its own pressures, because if you're talking, you need to listen, and you need to understand exactly what it is that the client is saying. Can you rephrase what they're saying so that you both agree? There's three critical questions. Do you understand it? Can you rephrase it? Do you both agree? We're then moving on to the kickoff point, where other relevant stakeholders may join in. You need to think about how much information do the clients actually want. And once you're clear with this, you can begin to put in these critical logistical markers. When do they need the information by? How do they need it delivered? Will it just take the form of a standard deck? But really importantly, will clients be able to tell you what would determine success for them? i.e., what does success look like for your clients? And if you can capture all of these expectations clearly at this point, then you have it as a reference point. Now, when it comes to designing a project, you need to think about what information is required. What information can come from the client? What needs to come from elsewhere? Which of this will be primary and which will be secondary? And what are the clients going to do with this information? Quite often it helps to map things out as a landscape in terms of a project and work backwards, because if you work backwards you can begin to see where the gaps are. And you can also begin to populate this landscape with known events and known catalysts that you know are taking place over this time frame. It could be that a conference is taking place. It could be that there is another known catalyst that you know will need to factor in at a certain point. And once you've got this visual timeline, this visual landscape, you can begin to see how it affects resources and logistics. Because of course you need to think about who the best people will be on this team, who's available and who's going to be most appropriate. You need to think also about how the budget is going to be managed. Knowing how this visual timeline looks will help you know where the surges of expenditure may be. And also you need to think about when clients need to be prepared. Not just in terms of the end point when you're delivering, but also at certain stages during that project timeline, you can mark particular flags. So this is communication with the clients. Where are the flag markers going to be where you can share where you're at and begin to give information ahead of time? And then with this visual timeline in place, you need to think about how you're actually going to run the team. And it begins, of course, with how you deliver that briefing. How are you going to deliver the briefing to everyone? Can they all be together as much as possible? Is that viable? What can be shared visually as some kind of record of this information? And can you timetable the updates? So we've got these three different elements. How you're going to deliver the briefing, what can be shared visually as some sort of record to refer back to, and have you timetabled really clearly where the updates and when the updates are happening. Now, running the team is that finding that balance between inclusion and momentum, which is a great art and comes with experience, but priming the team before each update is something you can do right from the word go. Can you also think about recording the information that's discussed in some sort of visual map? So you've got a record there of your discussions, of where you're at. Can you make sure that any information is being sent out regularly so everyone's kept up to date, even if it's not specifically relevant for their particular focus for the project? And can you make sure that everyone knows what their approach is going to be when things go wrong? When you hit a problem, how are you going to tackle that so that there is a consistency across the team? Now, as the information begins to come in, there are two elements that take place. The first is synthesis, and the second is analysis. When you're looking at this, you need to think about who and what are you going to be using to tackle this information. So what is going to be the role of brainstorming, and who are you going to be brainstorming with? What methods are you going to be using? Will it be the PM who's picking out the main themes? And will the PM work with the senior analyst and the PD to synthesize these key ideas to get things to a stage where you can deliver? And with the delivery, we're beginning to then think from this information, how can it be storyboarded? There are various different ways of doing this, and you need to look at the different formats. See what works best. Some people like to map out a narrative using post-it notes. Others like to create a preliminary deck. Others like to create a visual way of thinking that picks out those main themes. We then need to think about quality control. Does this have all the information the client told us they needed? Does it summarize things in a succinct way? Is there a set of implications that can be drawn from the information, if this is required? And finally, after things are delivered, you need to think about feedback. Feedback to your own team, to give them feedback about how they got on. Did they do what you wanted them to do? But crucially, feedback from the client. Can you find out from the client if it met their criteria? Was it successful? Will it be used further within their wider team? And the last thing to say is good luck.